I'm Molly Hanlon. I'm a PhD student at Penn State University, and I'm in the plant biology program. One word that describes how I work is, this is a hard one. I should have thought of it. Yeah. Do you have one? Do you have an answer to that?
I don't, because I flip all the time too. What I would say for this. I guess I would say I work curiously, maybe, because my favorite thing to do is actually dive into, like the knowledge that's already out there.
Right.
That's in the context of me researching for writing my blog.
Yeah.
And just like talking to scientists like about what they're doing.
Well, I got it. I think one word that describes how I work is socially.
Okay. That's a good one. All right. No one has used that one yet.
There we go. My favorite thing that I do at work is probably have really interesting and intriguing conversations with my lab mates.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite plant, I think, functionally has to be the coffee tree, right? Because no grad student does well without that. An interesting project I've been working on is I've been working with some other people in my lab to look at factors that might control certain root traits across different grasses. So both in rice and in corn and in Brachypodium to some extent, to see how those plants perform better under stress.
Okay. And you're looking at traits that go across, that are common to all those species.
Right. And like the control of them. So like we're doing GWAS in rice and in corn, and then we're using Brachypodium as a model and using all of the mutant lines to figure out if we knock those genes out in Brachypodium, does it do the same thing?
Got it. Okay. I see. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is your workspace setup like?
I have many different workspaces. So our lab here at Penn State, we actually have 4 labs, 3 greenhouses. I have an office here and I have an office at home. And I would say with what I'm doing right now, I spend most of my time at the computer. And there are 2 things that are key to my workspace setup. One is a big monitor, and the other is the ability to sit and stand. So I spend a lot of my time working at a standing desk. Otherwise, I slouch and have bad posture and get uncomfortable.
Okay. So what are some tools, apps, or websites that you use every day? And do you have a favorite one that you like to use for whatever reason?
So I'm a big Google Drive user for, accessing my documents everywhere. But to back up all my data, I use CrashPlan, which is a really good mindless data backup thing, which I think is really important.
I need to get into using CrashPlan. I downloaded it a long time ago, and I have not backed up my data to the cloud yet.
Yeah, I set it up and I just let it go, which is nice. Mm-hmm. In terms of websites I visit every day, especially today when I've been hacking away at R, is Stack Overflow, which I'm constantly looking for something on Stack Overflow and trying to use that code to my own advantage. So I would say that, definitely visit that every day. I would say I'm on Twitter every day, whether it's actively or passively, just seeing what's going on there and keeping up with things.
Okay. Yeah. So if you could eliminate one thing you spend a lot of time on, what would it be?
Fixing my own mistakes, or right. That's something I spend a lot of time doing that I wish I didn't have to. I know it's a learning process, but
don't we all?
Yeah, but little errors that are easy to fix. But even things like looking back at my old data or old things I've written, trying to make sense of them as I switch versions or I switch the way I do things. I look back at old stuff and I'm like, that's no good. I don't want to keep using that. So I think that's something I spend more time on than I should, is making sense of my old work.
So what have been the biggest productivity tools you've been using either for a long time or recently adopted?
I don't know. I'm not a big fan of productivity as like a
Okay. Well, I can tell you other people have answered with things like Google Docs.
Right. Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it can be that broad as a tool. Like,
Yeah,
Because
I
like
would
you
say
can sync them across systems, and like you can take your iPad and have your Google Doc up and writing something. And
yeah, so I do use Google Docs, and I've recently tried to switch most of my writing away from Word and into Google Docs. And so to do that, I've also to switch my reference manager. So I use PaperPile, which works with Google Docs, which is nice.
okay, yeah, I was gonna like those are gonna be my questions. Like, do you have a reference manager that you use in Google Docs?
I look back and I'm like, how did I survive before a reference manager? Because I remember manually typing in references. But yeah, I used Mendeley for a long time. But then when I decided to switch to Google Docs, I adopted PaperPile, which is nice.
What's some of the best advice you've ever received?
I don't know. I have two things here. I don't know if this is best advice, but I remember very early on when I started doing plant biology research, my advisor told me that plants don't take holidays or weekends, which is something good to internalize early on, that, you know, if my plants needed to be watered, I had to be there to water them. So that was just kind of a good piece of perspective. I think the other piece of advice that I've like carried over into research, but initially wasn't about that, came from a swim coach I had when I was 10 or 11 years old. And he would always say, always be a little bit uncomfortable. And it was about training, right? You never want to be going so easy that you're not tired. But I think that it really applies to anything you're doing. So you can get into, you know, doing experiments that you know, or doing the work that you know and never branching out. So I think I just have made that kind of a piece of advice that I've carried over into research. So like, maybe I don't know a lot about this, and it makes me uncomfortable to try, but I should do it because I'll learn something from it.
Yep. What's the best thing you've ever learned? That's a perfect answer.
R early is one of the best things that I learned. I had absolutely no computer science or coding or any sort of background like that. But when I started in my lab, it was like, we use R, go. And that was before a lot of things have gotten a lot easier in R. And there are a lot more resources, but I think learning that early and kind of just diving in and going with it has been really beneficial to me, because it's kind of expanded what I think is possible. So if I get a big data set, I'm not, you know, just going to get the means and the standard deviations. I think because I've learned more skills in R, I can like look at that data very differently. So I think that that's been beneficial, and I think that's something I can continue to build on.
So music, silence, white noise, what works for you?
So when I'm writing, I always listen to music. When I'm doing data analysis, I always listen to music. And it varies on my mood, I think. Sometimes I need to get like pumped up, like I can tackle this, and you know, I listen to something pretty upbeat. When I'm working in the lab or the greenhouse, it's always a podcast of some sort. So I think that that's a fun way to listen to something that's, you know, thought-provoking, but isn't necessarily science, but it keeps me exposed to a lot of other things that are going on.
Yeah. So what do you spend your time thinking about that's not your next proposal, publication, or project deadline?
Other than like what kind of job I'll have next, or like what my future is.
I mean, that could be something you think about too.
That's a big one, right? So my plan is to graduate before too long. So I think a lot about like, what do I want to do next, and where do I want to be, and how can I get there?
Yep. So, I can relate to that feeling.
That's a big one.
Even as a postdoc.
Yeah. Otherwise, I think about the big thing I think about, like, is it raining outside? Am I going to get rained on my bike ride home? That's a very common thought anytime I'm in the lab. Yeah.
Okay. Are you a bike commuter every day?
I am, yeah. Okay. It's only about 2 miles. I think if I drove to campus, I would park a mile away from my office. So I just ride my bike. And so there was one winter I rode every single day. I was really proud of that. It was like minus 20 degrees. I was like riding my bike, but
that's awesome.
Yeah, this winter, so I had knee surgery in December, so I was off my bike for a while, but back at it now.
Awesome. Oh, that's good. So if you're okay sharing, what's one way that viewers, in this case, can get in touch or follow along with your work Like, how do we get in touch with you?
I guess if we're tweeting at the meeting, I'll be on the whatever Twitter stream.
Okay. But like,
my Twitter handle, it's kind of I've had it forever. I'll tell a story.
Oh, so yeah, please.
It's Moll's Larity, which my friends in college, so I was a chemistry tutor for the swim team when I was in college. And we'd have this study group in this room, and they'd come in, and I'd always be saying to the freshmen on the team, like, you have to think about molarity. Like, you can't just you have to think about moles, and you have to think about molarity. So they started calling me, they called me Malls, it's Molly, and then they just added the larity because they were sick of me yelling at them about molarity. So that's where it came from. And I've never changed it, which is, I've thought about it, but then I'm too lazy.
So if you're comfortable sharing, what's a mistake that you made and how did you resolve it?
I think the biggest mistake I made was when I was starting in college. I was like, plants are the worst, and I never want to work on plants. So my mistake was being very dismissive of something I didn't know anything about. And I resolved it by getting a job in a plant lab because it was what was available. But and then just like being open to it once I was involved. But I look back on that a lot. And anytime I go to a seminar that I'm not super interested in, I'm like, well, this could be interesting. Think of how you thought about plants, 10 years ago, and see, look where you are now. So I think that's.
Okay. Yeah, and this was like, as an undergrad, you got involved in plant science.
Right. Yeah, but it was I think it was a big mistake of me to be as dismissive as I was of a whole field without knowing anything. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Like, who would you like to see do this next?
What about like Phil Taylor, someone who's like a plant scientist by training, but does something totally different now, just to be like this, the breadth of our field.
Okay. I will ask him.